Again, they got away with it. 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 Again, they got away with it.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to Heads Up. My name is Renette Senham, and you usually hear me on the second Wednesday of the month, but I am covering for Lee Osborne, as he's covered for me many times. So hello to those listeners who don't usually hear me on this Wednesday. Again, my name is Renette Senham, and this is Heads Up. And today we will be calling out the unpopular and bringing up alternatives and expanding the conversation about the world around us. We will be undercutting the left-right paradigm corporate top-down media that distorts our world, while showcasing activists, whistleblowers, everyday solutionarians making a difference. And of course, any opinion expressed during this hour is solely the responsibility of the speakers and in no way reflects the opinion of KVMR, its staff, supporters, or anyone else associated with this station. So, welcome to Heads Up. And we'd like to give a big shout out to one of our big supporters, Summertime's Bakery and Deli, a gourmet natural foods restaurant and caterer in Grass Valley, offering breakfast, lunch, and bakery items used local, organic produce and meats whenever possible. Open daily with online ordering available at summertimes.com. So, as I said, my name is Renette Senham, and this is Heads Up. And generally, I like to talk about things that we don't always see in the press or dots we don't connect, and like to give you some headlines of the world and some of those stories underneath the surface of the headlines. But today I'm going to dedicate my whole show to one topic that's extraordinarily important. Many of my listeners who hear me regularly have been hearing more about the wireless industry, particularly around a bill called SB 649, which is a small cells bill that has flown through the House, the Senate, and is now on the desk of Governor Jerry Brown. That's why I'm dedicating this whole entire show to educating the public about wireless effects, as well as the solutionarians and the activists, the amazing people who are doing an incredible fight and have been for years. So joining me at 12:30 today will be Susan Foster. And Susan is a medical writer who has worked with firefighters on health, safety, and policy with respects to cell towers on their fire stations since 2000. She organized a brain study of California firefighters in 2004 and was the original author of Resolution 15, passed by the International Association of Firefighters in 2004. And again, Susan will be joining me at 12:30. But until we get Susan on the line to talk about what's been happening with firefighters and how she took up this cause, why she took up this cause, I want to give you, again, a little backdrop, a little background into why I'm now advocating with educating the public about what's going on before us. So, first of all, I want to let folks know that when I talk about wireless impacts, I'm not against technology. I'm not against the internet. In fact, I had the first cellular phone store in Nevada County in 1990-91 and was very excited about the advent of wireless. I was a very extreme adventurist. I like to adventure around the world, and I love the idea of having a cell phone on the top of a mountaintop or down in a canyon somewhere in case somebody got hurt. It was wonderful. Now, when I had my cell phone store, I'd like to say that I was the individual that would be putting in the antenna that connected to the antenna on the top of the car, and I connected to your Motorola bag phone, and it was very exciting, and I was told by the industry experts that we have to make sure that those antennas are on top of the car because you'd never want it inside the car because a wireless signal would bounce around inside this metal box. And then one day, my first red flag was when all of a sudden these Motorola TAC phones came along and the antenna was being pulled out of the phone itself inside the car. And I asked these industry experts, well, wait a second. I thought it was dangerous for that signal to be inside this metal box. I go, no, it's not a problem now, which I thought was a bit odd. That was my first red flag. Then my next red flag did not come until decades later, and this is just a few years ago. When I knew the smart meters were coming out, wasn't too concerned about them. As an environmentalist, I was told smart grid, smart homes, smart meters, smart everything was really, well, smart, obviously, because they said so. And I got the smart meter put onto my gas and electric meter, and I wasn't worried about that. But interestingly enough, at the same time, I started telling my friends that I think I had a real serious health issue because I noticed that when I would go to sleep, I would hear the slightest little noise like my cat jumping onto my bed, and it would echo so loud in my head, it would actually startle me. And this kept happening as well as additional ringing in my ear, and I thought I had a brain tumor. I thought that there was this really serious issue here. And then at the same time, I've got my first bill from PG&E. And I look at this really cool graph that I thought was really awesome at first, that I could see where I would wake up in the morning and I was turning on my coffee pot. I could see when I was online, on my computer before I'd leave to go off to work. I could see the graph, the little line go down when I'd go off to work, and I'd see it go back up when I returned home and had lunch. And then I'd see my energy consumption again go back up when I come back from work, and then how it would go down again once I went to bed. And I realized, whoa, wait a second. This is a dangerous graph. I don't want someone grabbing my PG&E bill, looking at this, and knowing at 12:05 every single day, you're guaranteed that I wouldn't be home until 1 o'clock when I go have lunch at home. And for that reason, I'm like, I don't like this. Somebody could hack this information. It's wireless. Somebody could take that bill. They could see what my life is like. And all of a sudden, I realize the risk. So I get myself opted out on PG&E. And sure enough, some weeks later, my huge ringing in my head and my ears and that loud echo sound disappeared. And I thought, that's amazing. It's like gone. And then all of a sudden I thought to myself, wait a second, that smart meter. So I go running out, and sure enough, the smart meter's gone. That was 4 years ago. And that ringing and echo has never, ever come back. So that was my second big red flag. My third red flag was when Verizon came knocking to our town door, and I'm on the city council, and I still am right now, my second term. And we have this proposal where they want to put 8 antennas on a downtown historic registry here, building in the heart of Nevada City. And I'm already now very aware of being EMF sensitive, and that, yes, this wireless devices do emit some things that we don't really fully understand. The public's not aware. And I ultimately I'm not game for having cell towers in a historic district, certainly not this close to a population. And even hidden behind chimneys, that's even a worse idea because you don't even know they're there. So we say no to Verizon. They've come back, and they're still coming back with a variety of different proposals. So this fight is not done. But they did say they want to hold off for 6 months. And we asked, well, are you holding off because, and this is the the Verizon attorney. And we said, well, are you holding off because there's some kind of legislation coming down the pipe? And we were told, no, don't know what you're talking about. Sure enough, a week later, SB 649 comes along. And this is what I like to talk to you about. And this is from my blog website called thefoghornexpress.com. Again, thefoghornexpress.com. And here's some excerpts from that to get you all on the same page and updated to the developments. This proposal, SB 649, would prohibit local discretionary review of small cell wireless antennas, including equipment located on existing structures, located on new poles, structures, or non-pole structures. This proposal preempts adopted local land use plans by mandating that small cells be allowed in all zones as a use by right, including all residential zones. This bill also includes a de facto exemption of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, precluding all public considerations such as aesthetics, nuisance, and environmental impacts of these facilities, all of which are particularly important. Now let's talk about the telecommunication industry's gag order. Don't even think for a second that you will be able to bring up health concerns to our elected officials, whether they're human or animal or bug. Congress passed the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that prohibits state and local governments from denying permit applications for cellular towers based upon the environmental effects of radio frequency radiation, including microwave radiation. This is known as RFR. As far as radio frequency radiation. The FCC then issued a rule consistent with the Telecommunications Act. No state or local government may regulate the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless service facilities on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with the regulations contained in this chapter concerning the environmental effects of such emissions. Since 1996, when this telecommunications bill was enacted, essentially a gag order has been placed upon the American people regarding negative health impacts and safety concerns due to cell towers. This is why we have seen such an incredible proliferation of cell towers throughout the American landscape, not because they are safe and do no harm, but because we legally can't discuss or make decisions based upon the negative health impacts of radio frequency emissions, even though the World Health Organization officially classifies electromagnetic radiation as a possible 2B carcinogen, the same category as lead, DDT, in styrene. The League of California Cities, representing a consortium of California cities, concluded under this proposal, local governments would be required to give preferential treatment to one industry that has received the, quote, most favored nation, unquote, status under the new law. Now, just to let you all know, a most favored nation clause is a level of status given to one country or corporation by another and enforced by the World Trade Organization. Yes, the WTO. That's where this is coming from. Countries achieving most favored nation status or corporations receiving the status are given specific trade advantages such as reduced tariffs on imported goods, and no jurisdiction is provided for why this is necessary. So basically, they're given free rein because they're considered a most favored nation. This bill is a Pandora's box for local authority. This sets a very dangerous precedent that opens the door for any other corporation to come into our California communities and squash local government control in order to deploy any kind of corporate undertaking without the public's or elected officials' consent. This Pandora's box was never more apparent than during last summer's press conference when Tom Wheeler, former head of the CTIA, the vast telecoms lobby group, and controversial chair of the Federal Communications Commission, proposed an unbridled massive deployment of commercial 5G transmitters launching in 2020. We're talking to the tune of 2 million of these cell antennas. Anticipating tens of billions of dollars of economic growth with U.S. telecoms first out the gate, Wheeler informed American public that they needed to stay out of the way of technological development. Turning innovation loose is far preferable to expecting regulators to define the future. That's right, those pesky regulators, the ones who protect us from harm. Why do we think that they're going to protect the public by just deploying this? Who's there? And that's the case about this, is that we are no longer being protected. The agencies that used to be there are no longer there. And industry knows this, and they're fully taking advantage of it. Then, with little fanfare, the FCC approved swaths of untested high-frequency networks for private sector exploitation, ultimately setting a very dangerous trend, with no mention of health or environmental impacts, oversight, or corporate responsibility. If this deployment happens, if SB 649 is signed by Governor Jerry Brown this week or next week, we don't know, it's on his desk, we can expect to see antennas, cell antennas, every 5 to 10 homes. And this is a fact. This is in the bill, with refrigerator-sized electrical boxes that have diesel-backed generators about every 50 feet. Again, imagine your beautiful homes and your neighborhoods with these every 5 to 10 feet, lots of electrical boxes hanging off the poles on the actual sidewalks, lots of cables. And again, the local authorities and home or property owners have no say in this. Most stunningly is that once cell antennas have been added onto, as far as the cell antennas on the light posts and the electrical poles, they can actually then add an additional 10 feet onto those poles and add additional cell antennas. Our power grid and our electrical lines, they are not built for this load, and they actually attach that cell. Those cells are attached to the actual wires themselves, and they send that wireless signal goes down the actual wires, down traveling along the poles and into all our buildings, our businesses, and our homes for a 24/7 emission, constant. You can't opt out, and unless you want to completely unplug your whole entire house, you can't stop this. First of all, our power grid, electrical lines, this load on the circuitry has never been tested for safety, and this infrastructure was never built for a wireless signal to travel down our power lines and into our homes and commercial buildings. No environmental reports are being done on this, not on the health, not on the aesthetics. There's no oversight, no monitoring. And yes, SB 649 does mention feasible design and co-location standards, but California does not have any standards yet, and there is no enforcement body. It does not exist. there is no enforcement provisions and no funding for any of this. This burden of the creation of feasible design and co-location standards is on the state and local cities and counties and is unfunded mandate that will come out of our tax dollars to develop the needed regulatory standards and to clean up the mess that this bill, SB 649, is creating. And oops, they forgot to include any funding to enforce or regulate the actual infrastructure. The industry claims to be gifting California with their 5G hardware without a penny for the creation of the needed regulations. It's all part of the industry's push for this deregulation. Everything else placed in public right-of-way today is required to meet very specific engineering codes for environmental health and safety. It's unconscionable that safety standards have been overlooked in the SB 649 funding. Currently, they plan on paying us $250 per antenna, but that's not going to cover the costs. And there's also the shock, fire, and electrocution hazards of the cellular electrical power supplies. These are 35 cubic feet, okay, and square cubic feet to consider that they're going to be placing these into the right-of-way in close proximity to where children and unknowing individuals may play or touch them or work without any existing required markings, no signage. This bill approves the placement of the industry's hardware, but completely lacks the inclusion of any funding for the creation of needed design, construction, and operating codes and standards for safety. We are calling this the wireless Wild West, and we're not joking. This is a free-for-all. There's no one out there. There's not a sheriff protecting us. There's not an agency protecting us. It's a free-for-all. So, what do? Well, first of all, it's pretty serious. And let me tell you, the telecom industry knows how much harm this can do to us because Verizon even warned its shareholders in one of its newsletters about an upcoming large wave of lawsuits due to RF injury cases. So they actually had to figure out how to remove that liability and put it elsewhere. And they have. They're putting it on the cities and counties. Now, this is the doozy. Most cities and counties don't know they're flying without a net. Because insurance underwriter Lloyd's of London stopped covering lawsuits due to RF injury in 2015. That's right. Lloyd's of London, who actually underwrites the insurance companies, they were clearly reading the writing on the wall and removed themselves from that liability. So a city or county with a cell tower or antenna are literally flying without a net when it comes to lawsuits. I won't say if you get sued, I will say when, because this is so grave. Your insurance will not cover you. This is going to bust down cities and counties as far as lawsuits. So if it passes and becomes law, effective January 1st, 2018, nearly all cell towers may be sited by telecom carriers without any local control. An amendment was added to the bill at the 11th hour to grant a pass to macro towers. These are larger towers, allowing cell towers of multiple shapes and sizes to be sited without cities or local residents having any say in the matter. For all the connectivity people have come to wish for, no one wants to wake up with a tower beaming at them or looming over their home. Prior to this expansive amendment taking the proposed legislation from bad to Orwellian, Senate Bill 649 was designed to allow for rapid deployment of small cell towers to be placed, as I said, every 5 to 10 homes without that local zoning procedures. And they have guaranteed for 20 years by the Telecommunications Acts of 1996. This is what they've guaranteed, and it's been happening, this kind of deployment. And this is the expansion. This is part of the expansion of the coming 5G infrastructure that's going to be built out. This is what it's going to look like. So, who's opposed to this? Well, right now, over 300 cities out of 400 in the state of California are officially opposed to this. And they see this as a state giveaway to the telecom industry. Also, it's not just them. We have incredible 47 counties out of 58 counties opposed to this officially. We also have organizations like AARP and Sierra Club, and it goes on and on and on. And of course, as I said, the League of California Cities are saying no to this. So what we're going to be doing in just a few minutes is we're going to be bringing on somebody to really get more into some of the science and the impacts it's had on, of all things, the canary in the coal mine, our firefighters, who have been actually on the forefront of what wireless does to us. So Susan Foster, when I talk about solutionarians, I'm talking about basically activists. And I've said many times to my listeners, basically, you don't wake up, one day and say, I'm going to be an activist. Or as a child, you're dreaming, well, I'll be an attorney or a doctor or an activist. That's not how it works generally. There's a calling or there's a threat. There's something that's putting your well-being or your family's well-being at risk that turns you into a solutionarian. Now, for Susan, in her blog, or her piece that she writes, Cell Tower Hypocrisy, Rescuing Firefighters, Not Kids, is on her website, fearlessparent.org. And she writes here as far as her introduction into the wireless world. Almost 20 years ago, I was walking our family dog after watching the school bus disappear from sight. From behind a small cluster of palm trees, a woman stepped out of the shadows. She asked if we could speak, but insisted on doing so out of sight of passerbys. She confirmed who I was and asked if she had her information correct that I was a medical writer. I said I was. And suddenly, the vaguely familiar face had more meaning. She was the wife of a young telecom executive who lived several streets over. Our children went to the same school, and I was then asked by the stranger if I could lead the neighborhood's fight against a proposed cell tower being permitted for the golf course surrounding our neighborhood. I responded with a question that seems almost inconceivable today. What's a cell tower? Well, Susan will be joining us in just a minute to explain what are cell towers and much, much more after this short little break. So just give me a couple minutes and we're going to bring Susan here and we're going to get to the bottom of this.
Because he promised to fix everything. Now I can go back to sleep. Again, they got away with it. 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 Well, fear and greed run this country. Corporations craving more. Because greed sells insurance. And fear sells another war. We make war on the Muslims. We make war on the blacks. We kill Hispanics and the Asians. And Israelis got our backs. Again, they got away with it. 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 Well, they robbed us of our money. And they gave it to the men who stole away our houses. And they can rip you off again. Got us slaving off our credit cards. Is there pipeline into you?
And welcome back to Heads Up. My name is Renette Senham, and I'm covering for Lee Osborne today. Wonderful gentleman, and he always covers for me, so I'm happy to do this. And as many of you know, I have been talking here on Heads Up, and this is KVMR FM, Nevada City, and KCPC Camino and Placerville. And I like to uncover things that we don't always know about. And we are going to be assisted with that today by an incredible woman activist and solutionarian, Susan Foster. And Susan, are you there?
I am here.
Awesome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure. Well, Susan, I just have to say, you and I have been working together for just a few weeks on SB 649, complete strangers and completely thrown in together in a little dinghy in a very big sea, a very big ocean. And I have to tell you that I have been so extraordinarily inspired by this group of people that I'm the newbie that have been fighting this fight for really some people decades. And really some of the most brilliant PhDs, MDs, researchers, heads of departments have been fighting this good fight, and very few people know about it.
We have a great group, and it's a great group across the nation. It's just that very few people hear that there are health concerns, and they don't realize, I think, the depth of the legitimacy behind this and the quality of the people involved. So it's been a pleasure getting to know you over the last few weeks. We've been working so intensely trying to stop S649. I'd say it feels like it's been for years that I've known you, because it's a great deal of work packed into a very short period of time. So I'm hoping that your listeners will be able to come on board, at least in terms of doing one of four things, and I can give them an avenue for connecting with and contacting Governor Jerry Brown to let him know that he really must veto this bill. But I can get into the reasons why as we talk.
That would be great if you don't mind. So what I like to do is that you got in this because of firefighters and the cell antennas and fire stations. Talk to me about that. What were their symptoms?
Okay, well, I got into this originally as you were introducing me through a community fight, a neighborhood fight, which is the way so many of us have started. My situation was a little bit different in that I was fed inside industry information. So the person who recruited me to lead the fight against the cell tower in my neighborhood was the wife of a telecom executive. And when I didn't have a clue, as you mentioned, as to what a cell tower was, and I didn't understand the science, I didn't even know the science existed. I didn't know the military science went back decades showing radiation sickness as a problem. And so when I mentioned to this woman, I'm a medical writer, health writer for women's magazines, and yes, I can understand a medical study essentially, but I don't know even where to start. Her comment to me was, "Don't worry, we'll take care of it." And so probably 3 mornings a week when I opened my door at 6 a.m. to take my dog out, there would be a manila envelope unmarked on my doorstep. Now, I had been out the night before at 11 o'clock to take the dog last thing, so somebody came during the middle of the night, left science on my doorstep a couple mornings a week, and that went on for weeks and weeks until I had a very tall stack of science on my kitchen table. That's how I got into this. And I couldn't leave it because this was inside information, and this was really quite terrifying. And this was back in 1999, 2000. So we defeated the cell tower in my neighborhood. There was an interview, and in the process, a firefighter saw me explaining how we'd fought this neighborhood fight and asked if I could help. And he said that their station was about to get hit with 24 antennas, and they were out of money. And they could not fight these on their own. They couldn't go to their chief. The chiefs, by the way, for the fire departments, they do rent out the space on the stations and in the parking lots adjacent to the fire stations because it's revenue producing for the cities and counties. Uh-huh. But the people in the line of fire are not the chiefs and not the leaders in the community, not the town council, not the city board of supervisors. It's the firefighters, the rank and file, and they're the ones who live and sleep in the fire stations, and so that's why they are our canaries in the coal mine. They're the ones who've been getting hit for over 2 decades.
And what does that look like when you say getting hit? How does that manifest?
Well, what happened in a station that we studied in Central California was that the cell tower was placed closest to the source of electricity because it was cheaper, okay? So it was put on the street side of the fire station. On the other side were 12 lanes of traffic, kind of typical Central California traffic. And the objective of the wireless industry was to reach the traffic because of all the people going by. At that time, it was legal to talk on the cell phone in your car. And so they wanted to reach that traffic, and so they beamed right across the station. So these guys really did get blasted with radiation. We're talking radio frequency radiation. And for those of you who don't know, radio frequency it sounds like radio, right? It sounds fairly benign. And it's supposed to sound benign because it's window dressing. It's a euphemism for microwave radiation. Just substitute microwave radiation, and information, data is stored on, let's just say, on the backs of the microwaves to give you sort of a metaphor. And then they will travel from the cell tower, through whatever is in line of sight, and this would be the fire station or the firefighters living in there, toward the traffic. And so they, 24 hours a day, they did 24 hours on, 24 hours off shifts. So they were really getting hit hard. And their symptoms, I think some of you will recognize. I do, because the firefighters, the strongest of the strong among us, we probably have some stronger people out there, but our firefighters, men and women, they go through grueling physical tests to be hired on to the fire service. And in California, where it is so competitive to become a firefighter, you also have to score in the 98th or 99th percentile cognitively. Okay, so most people don't know that firefighters take cognitive exams as well. That's important to remember when you understand that we did find brain damage in these firefighters. Okay, so their symptoms, and these started the day the tower was activated. Okay, and they were all men, and these men, and like all firefighters, are loath to complain. They
Right.
will go through a great deal of challenge and pain and suffering and the emotional impact of various things, and because they see the worst of the worst, and they don't complain. These guys were complaining because they felt horrible. And so here were some of their symptoms right out of the box the day the tower was activated. And keep in mind, they had been told by the wireless carrier that there was no problem. This is perfectly safe. The carrier told the chief that. The chief told the men. And the men, a few were concerned. A few had heard a couple of things that maybe this was dangerous, but they were reassured it would be fine. They knew they were tough. And so migraine, first day, different types of headaches, extreme fatigue, extreme. Then as the days and weeks and months progressed, they realized they were going through these periods of severe insomnia, and firefighters are trained to get up for a 911 emergency, respond quickly. They take care of the emergency, they come back, and they go back to bed. And they go to sleep because they know that they train their bodies this way because they know that they could get another call in 45 minutes or 2 hours, and they need to be rested, and they're going to be busy all day. They're not going to be napping during the day. So they normally would go right back to sleep, but they couldn't. They couldn't go to sleep, so they're wide-eyed. And then when they did sleep, it was like an anesthesia-like sleep. And then there were 911 calls, and they woke up with this feeling of being drugged. So then you've got emotional impacts from this, too. They went through depression. They went through anxiety. They went through unexplained anger. There was one firefighter who, the guy, we all adored him. I got to know these men over a long period of time, and his brothers there adored him, too. He'd never been angry in his life. He'd never raised his voice. He was just so mild-mannered. And they're all feeling quite lousy, but they're also being told by the wireless carrier, you're fine. There's nothing. This is not connected. It must be a virus, must be something. Yeah. It was when this one firefighter who was so even-tempered and so well-modulated exploded in anger. He just went into a rage, an absolute rage. And they said that was the point, that they knew. There was also a Friday night, not too many months into their exposure to this tower, when 2020 was on. And one of the firefighters' wives called and said, turn the TV on. You guys have been lied to. And Louis Lesson was one of the people on the radio show, or on the television show in 2020, and he's the editor of Microwave News. There was George Carlo, who had been the lead scientist for the industry, actually, and so considered one of the bad guys, and he was coming out as a whistleblower and saying that we know that this is harmful and we suspect it can cause cancer. Louis Lesson was very clear on it. And so they were, telling the 2020 audience, there was a rapt audience of firefighters sitting there in Central California listening to them, and they were furious. And they knew they'd been lied to. They felt their chief had been duped, and they decided to sue the wireless company, and they tried to.
And and ultimately they prevailed, but it was a long, long fight.
They didn't prevail in that sense. They prevailed in a different sense, in that they eventually, in 2004, they volunteered to have their brains scanned. And so that's where we found the damage, and that's why we are here today with this exemption, that these 5G towers cannot be put on fire stations. But let me tell you, so this is a very important question that you asked. All right, they did not prevail. They went through all the depositions. They spent all the money that they had, and they got to court, and their case was thrown out on the first day. And do you know why? We cannot sue a wireless carrier. We cannot sue the county. We cannot sue the city. We can't sue Governor Brown. We can't sue the state of California for ruining our health, because there's something called the preemption clause, Section 704 in the Telecommunications Act of 1996,
right, that
says that you cannot argue that health is an issue when you go before your local planning board. And if you do, you can say it, but if the planning board then denies the tower based on health, then it's automatically allowed. Okay, the permit is automatically allowed. In other words, we have duct tape over our mouths when it comes to health. And so we can't sue on health and we can't complain about it. when we want to fight a tower. But we do have one avenue, and that's aesthetics. Right? We were given one last vestige of local control, and that's aesthetics. And SB 649 will take that away from us.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And you and I were talking about this earlier about most people, like what you said, when you ask what is a cell tower, you didn't see them. It's like your brain didn't know what it was, so it never even recognized it in the environment. And I ask my listeners, please, when you go out today, when you drive, if you're driving around the Sacramento area right now, and especially if you happen to work at the Capitol, be aware of this. You are surrounded by these antennas everywhere, and you go through the city and you're driving down 80. You look out into the landscape, and there's towers on buildings and huge towers, and it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
You're right.
And I want I want people to be aware of that. And this is the thing and this is what makes it so dangerous, because you can't see, right, the radio wave frequencies. You can't see them. And I try to equate it to this. Imagine every smart device that you have, every cell tower, every smartphone, smart watch, smart home, smart burglary system, smart radio, whatever, smart everything. Okay, let's say that it's emitting what's equivalent in radio frequencies in smoke. If we saw all these little toys that we have, right, and devices around us emitting the same amount in smoke and not invisible radio frequencies, we'd be in smoke-filled buildings and rooms. We'd see smoke everywhere, and we'd be yelling, "Fire! There's a fire somewhere. We've got fires everywhere. We need to put those out." But we can't see the smoke when it comes to these radio frequencies. That's the danger.
No, I think that's a great analogy, because if we could see it or smell it or taste it or feel it in a recognizable way, then we wouldn't be in this situation now. People would be marching in the streets saying this has to stop. But we're lulled into this. There is a love affair with the devices. Okay,
right. There's an addiction. It's an addiction.
Yeah, there are studies showing that this is physiologically addictive, and I think that anybody who uses their phone a lot and just is in love with that connectivity, when you put your phone away or you don't have access to it, or you drop it, it breaks or something, a lot of people go through a certain amount of anxiety, and they think that's just because they're falling behind. Then they can't check their mail, they can't check Facebook, they can't check, to see who's called. All right, but it's more than that. This radiation appears to trigger a pleasure center in the brain
is
very similar to the one for cocaine.
That's right.
And so there is a withdrawal, and it can be severe.
Right. Well, and the thing is again, we go back to the fact there's this gag order, and I say, okay, let's pretend that this gag order that the cellular industry, the wireless industry, has on the public and the officials. Imagine for a moment that when at the beginning of automobiles, if the auto industry had the same gag order on Americans and public officials where they couldn't talk about the dangers of driving fast, okay? So imagine we can't talk about the harm and what it's doing to us and how we can reduce that risk and that harm, because we were allowed to have a real conversation about the dangers of driving. We were allowed to put speed limits on highways and add seatbelts and airbags to reduce the risk to ourselves when we are driving. But the telecom industry is not allowing us to have that conversation to A, let the public even know there is a risk, and B, to do the harm reductive measures that we should be putting into place.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And the silencing, people are unaware of the silencing that has occurred, and it's been in place legally since 1996. This is, what the firefighters found out. Right. This is something that I would like everybody to know, that this is a full frontal assault on democracy.
Yes, it is.
It is. And it should turn every single one of us into an activist at some level. And I don't care if people are picking up the phone and calling Jerry Brown and saying, we don't want SB 649, and I would love for people to become more involved in this whole movement to make technology, let's not stop technology, but let's make it safer. But
exactly.
5G and SB 649 is completely out of control. Do people know what the landscape is going to look like?
That's right.
This is what I wonder, and this is why the Teamsters oppose this.
Right, exactly.
And this, the Teamsters they represent the people who build the sets in Hollywood. And the reason the Teamsters were brought into the opposition to SB 649 is because the set builders were saying we won't be able to film in Hollywood anymore.
That's right.
Because there will be cell towers everywhere. So think of waking up, even if you're not concerned yet about health, think of waking up and looking at the lamppost that illuminates your street. That's a cell tower. Next to that is an electric box to power it. Inside that electric box, which can emit shocks and has no warning on it whatsoever, I think you touched on that when you started the show, Renette.
Right.
There's diesel fuel.
That's right.
So we are not supposed to. We have a law that says we're not supposed to have diesel fuel by children, but children are going to be playing on the sidewalk. This is going to be in the right-of-way with people passing by with absolutely no money in this bill for design protection, for signage on there to say that this is potentially dangerous, and this is going to be not just one on a street. It's going to be, I heard you say every 5 to 10 homes, and that's what a lot of people are saying. I say every 2 to 10 because it depends how widely apart the homes are spaced.
Right.
And so,
well, and also the thing that's really a doozy is that, this equipment hanging on power poles has started multi-million dollar fires. I believe Malibu fires. This is a very famous case. And what's really crazy to me is to have these diesel back generator, these power sources every about 50 feet. They're not, again, that's kind of a little bit murky, but here we have forest fires going on everywhere in California. Right. They're ripping through neighborhoods. So imagine a fire coming into your neighborhood. Oh, by the way, every 50 feet is it's a diesel time bomb. That's insane. We have snow and ice here. Cars go off the roads, trucks go off the road all the time. When you hit one of the things, again, it's going to be explosive. This is the most irresponsible piece of legislation and dangerous piece of legislation I've seen on so many levels that I can believe it's gotten this far because the telecom industry, as we know, is like the biggest lobbyist industry out there. So that kind of explains a lot right there. Follow the money. But it's horrendous. And people do want to have this reach out to Jerry Brown, who's got this bill on his desk right now. So anyone in North San Juan, anyone in Nevada City who's friends with Jerry Brown or even Gary Snyder, who knows Jerry Brown, tell him to slow this train down, because not only are firefighters at risk, but then we have the young. And children, because of the soft tissue and soft bone and so on, absorb much more radiation than adults.
They do, and that's a danger because their body mass is hit harder because they are small. They get the same blast of radiation that we do, and their skulls are thinner, and so it penetrates their brain more easily. And then they also have rapidly dividing cells. So when there's DNA damage, which our National Toxicology Program study, $25 million rat study, just found that it just came out yesterday with the result of the DNA damage. And so this can cause cancer. And it's when children are impacted, I'm greatly concerned about their chances of having cancer in years to come because of the DNA damage that can occur. So this strikes me as insanity to go forward with this bill. If Jerry Brown signs this bill, it will, in my way of thinking, and I don't mean this to be hyperbole, I think this will ruin his legacy.
I agree with you because I know that the water pipeline's really what he thinks his legacy is going to be. But I'm like, no. You're going to be surprised. And I know the telecom industry, from what I was told by an insider, I've not confirmed, but I was told that the telecom is actually promising millions of dollars to the water pipeline. So that's one reason why Brown has been really quite supportive of this thus far. But folks, you're listening.
That's what they do. I mean, that is what they do. That is how they get what they want, and that's how they do it behind the scenes. I've heard the same thing about the water pipeline, but here's what I think Jerry Brown's legacy is going to be. And if this concerns you, please go to known649.org. Okay, known649.org is a website that will give you Jerry Brown's phone number, fax, email, and his address. And you can write to him, but I think time is very short, so I'll probably opt for the email link or a phone call.
And folks, I want you to know that you're listening to Susan Foster, who is a medical writer who's been working with firefighters on health and safety policy with respect to cell towers since 2000, the year 2000. And she's also helped organize a brain study of California firefighters in 2004 showing neurological damage. So Susan has been fighting this fight for a long time. And as you said, if people want more information or instruction on what to do, you definitely want to go to know on 649.
No on 649, yeah.
.org.
No on 649.org. And then contact Jerry Brown and just tell him, please veto this bill. And veto is the key thing. It has flown through the legislature, through the Assembly, and through the Senate, and you would think that the Assembly members and the senators were voting for oxygen itself.
Right.
They are not thinking about the impact of this bill. They're not thinking about what it's going to do to all of it. The health part, I think, has been ignored and suppressed, and that's going to be Jerry Brown's legacy. It will be a lot of sick people.
That's right.
It will be burdening the healthcare system with not just brain cancers. Brain cancer, heart cancer, and DNA damage was found in this National Toxicology Program study, $25 million study, the first U.S. study of great significance in decades. And I think, Renette, your listeners should know, too, because people wonder, wait, why haven't we heard? There are thousands of studies out there in the world.
Peer-reviewed thousands, yes.
Literally thousands. But why has the U.S. not been focusing on this? In the early 80s, and this is very important to know, in the early 80s, President Ronald Reagan defunded the EPA's arm that did research on RF radiation. Concurrent with that, the cell phone industry was taking off. Is it a coincidence? I think not.
Right.
So if you don't study something, you don't find evidence of harm.
That's correct. And one of the things that's most astounding is a couple different things. One is that we know that there's been gliomoblastomas, which Senator McCain had. Senator Kennedy died from. Joe McCain's son, died from. These are due to people holding up their cell phones next to their, usually like one side of the head consistently. Yeah. So we are seeing these gliomablastoma brain tumors in bankers, real estate developers, politicians, because they're always on their phone. Well, these gliomablastomas were quite rare and unusual. You'd see them usually somebody 65 years and older. And today, the highest sector of the population that are getting these gliomablastomas are 20 to 29-year-olds.
And that's terrifying.
It's terrifying. The other thing that really is upsetting to me is people ask, well, what is the end goal of this SB 649 deployment? I said, really, ultimately, it is a communion. It is bringing together virtual reality and combining it with physical reality. And what is so unsettling, and again, this is a study that many who are fighting this are very familiar with, this technology, this microwave technology literally takes your sweat ducts and turns them into antennas. That water that's in your sweat duct and traveling through your skin, so your sweat ducts and your skin are actually going to be receiving and sending out information which will literally turn the human population into walking antennas. And I'm not kidding. This sounds sci-fi surreal, but this is what is being deployed without the public's consent.
Absolutely. And the 5G is a millimeter wave. We've been dealing with microwaves with the previous 2G, 3G, and that means second generation, wireless, third generation wireless, 4G, fourth generation. 5G is a different animal. It's a millimeter wave that has been used in weaponry in the military. It's been studied a great deal by the Soviets, and by the way, they're not using it the same way. They're not doing this 5G deployment. Which is interesting. They've done the science. They know what would happen to their population. In the U.S., it's one big, giant human experiment if we go forward with this. And I would like to emphasize that you're right about this 5G millimeter wave does penetrate, many scientists think not deeper than skin level, but it's absorbed by the water cells. Where are the aqueous cells, the water cells? They're on our skin. Also on our eyes and the testes. The eyes, skin, and testes will be warmed by this. Will they be burned? I don't know.
Right. And so people always want to know, well, how can I reduce my exposure? Many times when you're walking or driving around with your phone and it's looking for cell towers, that's when it's really emitting a lot of radiation. Put it on airplane mode when you're driving or walking. Turn it off at nighttime. Or when not using the internet, I now personally turn off my modem. I only turn on only when I need to get online, period. I give myself, the bees, the animals. This decimates bats, and we know decimates birds and honeybees. So I try to give that around me rest. And then I have for my laptop a thing called a Hera pad, which is a little looks like a little wooden, almost like a piece of wood underneath my computer, but it kind of helps reduce the emissions. And then I have another little pad, so I have a few more inches off of and away from my lap or I put this also on the table because it's emitting all the time. So there are certain things that you can do to reduce your exposure. And you and I were talking about, I guess, swimming in water, taking a bath in water, or even the shower helps reduce. It grounds you, which was amazing to know. So, Susan, what we are going to have to do, we only have about another 3 minutes left here. And so tell our audience members or listeners exactly what it is that you suggest, or for more information, where can they go? And as you said, time is of the essence. This bill is on Jerry Brown's desk right now. Please, if you know Jerry, please reach out to him and tell him stop, stop, stop. What else can you suggest?
We do. We need for him to stop. We need a pause. We need to bring brilliant minds together and do this in a more in a safer way. We need to test 5G. It needs to be proven safe before it's put out there for 24/7 exposure for our children, for animals, for all of us. And so, I would urge you strongly to go to a website, no on 649.org.
And also
no on 649.org.
By the way, fiber optics, hardwiring is the answer. You want to hardwire your computer, get those cables to the houses. By the way, we have already paid the telecom industry with fees on our telephone bills and taxes and subsidies to lay in that fiber optics, and instead they're pulling out copper lines. So we've already paid for the infrastructure, and they have taken those funds, they have usurped those funds, and they're using them towards their wireless cell antennas, less infrastructure, more money in their pocket, and it's at our cost, everyone's cost, including the whole entire biosphere. That's what we've come down to. So, Susan,
that's exactly correct.
I have to say again, I just want to say thank you to you. I'd like to thank everyone for California Alliance for Safer Technology. .org. You can check them out. Just Google California Alliance for Safer Technology. This is a group of people that I've been working with and Susan's been working with, who are incredible heroes and solutionarians. And I hear the exhaustion in their voice. It's an incredible long battle. And I believe people are going to be waking up. And so I just want to say thank you again. And folks, if you want more information, you said no on 649.org. Go
no on 649.org. Also, I would urge people to go to look at the science. Go to bioinitiative.org.
That's correct.
Bioinitiative.org. They've got over 3,800 studies they've culled and researched. And then Physicians for Safe Technology has a wonderful site that is emerging. It's mdsafetech.org. That's mdsafetech.org. That will give you the science. And then to communicate your concern about SB 649 and to urge Jerry Brown to veto this bill, please go to no on 649.org, and then it gives you the 4 options to reach out to him. And please, numbers matter. They really matter. So pick up the phone and call if you can.
Right. Now would be the time, as you said, to be the solutionary, be the activist. And I just want to say thank you so much, Susan, again, for this incredible work that you're doing. And for my listeners, my name is Renette Senum, and this is Heads Up. And you can catch me the second Wednesday generally of the month at 12:05 p.m. So I just want to say thank you to all the listeners, and be aware, be open, and most of all, have your head up. Thank you, everyone, and thank you again, Susan.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Again, they got away with it. 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 Again, they got away with it.